What if, in the space between life and death, you were given the chance to live every life you could have lived? What if every choice you didn't make, every regret you carried, unfolded into an alternate reality waiting for you to step into? Matt Haig's The Midnight Library explores this very idea through the journey of Nora Seed, a woman who believes her life has lost all meaning, until she stumbles into a library that holds infinite possibilities. Today, we're diving deep into this thought-provoking and heartwarming novel, breaking it down chapter by chapter, uncovering its lessons on regret, hope, and the infinite potential of life. A conversation about rain. We meet Nora Seed as a teenager in her school library, talking with Mrs. Elm, the school librarian. Mrs. Elm encourages Nora, reminding her that she has endless possibilities in front of her, like doors she can step through. Even at this early age, Nora feels an undercurrent of doubt, as though she is unworthy of those possibilities. The rain falling outside mirrors her uncertainty, soft and persistent, hinting at the weight she will carry into adulthood. The conversation plants the seeds of hope, but also foreshadows the regret and hesitation that will dominate her later life. 19 years later, nearly 2 decades pass. Nora is now 35, living in Bedford, and the spark she once carried has faded. Her days blend together in monotony, filled with loneliness, disappointment, and self-doubt. Where once there were dreams of greatness, now there is only a routine that feels suffocating. Her life is quiet, but it is the silence of stagnation, not peace. The unspoken message is clear. Potential without action can turn into a heavy burden of regret. The man at the door, Ash, her kindly neighbor, arrives at her doorstep with heartbreaking news. Her beloved cat, Voltaire, has been found dead, struck by a car. The cat was one of Nora's last companions, a source of small comfort in her isolated world. This loss, though seemingly small in the grand scheme, devastates her. It represents not just the death of a pet, but the collapse of yet another fragile anchor holding her to life. Her despair deepens. String theory. Nora trudges into her job at String Theory, the music shop, only to be fired by her boss, Neil. He points out her lack of enthusiasm and motivation, telling her bluntly that she seems unhappy and that the job doesn't fit her. Losing her job is another blow, compounding her growing sense of uselessness. The shop's name, String Theory, becomes a quiet metaphor, an allusion to the infinite threads of existence, which Nora feels increasingly cut off from. To live is to suffer. Nora spends the day spiraling in self-reflection. Memories of lost opportunities rise to the surface. The swimming career she abandoned, the band that could have taken off, relationships that slipped away. Her mind replays the what-ifs endlessly, each one stabbing at her sense of worth. Depression wraps around her like a heavy fog, leaving her convinced that she brings only pain to herself and others. Doors. She encounters Ravi, her brother's old friend and former bandmate. The conversation reopens old wounds about the band's failure, and Ravi directly blames her for abandoning their shot at success. This stirs memories of her strained relationship with her brother, Joe, and reinforces the narrative that she has let everyone down. Every door she closed in her past now feels like evidence of her inadequacy. How to be a black hole. Loneliness threatens to consume Nora. She tries reaching out to her best friend Izzy, who has moved to Australia, but Izzy does not respond. Nora compares herself to a black hole, something that drains light and energy from everything around it. Her self-worth plummets further, and she begins to believe she is a burden on those she loves. Antimatter. Her isolation intensifies. She misses her piano lesson with Leo, a student who once looked up to her. Even the elderly neighbor who once depended on her no longer needs her help. It feels as if every tether that once connected her to the world has been severed. The metaphor of antimatter is apt. She sees herself as something destructive, erasing rather than contributing. Midnight. Nora decides to end her life. She takes an overdose and drifts into unconsciousness. Instead of death, she finds herself in a strange, mist-filled space outside of time. In the distance looms a large, quiet building, a library. The clock strikes midnight, but never moves forward. Time itself has frozen. This marks the threshold between life and death, where Nora's extraordinary journey will begin. The librarian. Inside, Nora encounters Mrs. Elm once again, though now in a surreal and almost magical form. Mrs. Elm explains the purpose of the Midnight Library. It is a place between life and death, a liminal space where Nora can confront her regrets. Every book represents a different version of her life, a path she could have taken, a door she could have opened. For the first time, Nora glimpses the true magnitude of choice. The Midnight Library. Nora learns the rules. She may open any book, step into any version of her life, and live it as if it were real. If she finds herself disappointed, she will return to the library. If she finds a life she truly wishes to stay in, she can remain there. This structure gives her both freedom and responsibility, but also overwhelms her with the enormity of possibility. The moving shelves. The shelves stretch infinitely, shifting and shimmering. Mrs. Elm introduces Nora to the heaviest book of all, the Book of Regrets. It contains every single regret Nora has ever had, large and small, written in excruciating detail. The sight of it is almost unbearable. The Book of Regrets. Nora opens the book and is confronted with page after page of regrets. Each one carries the sting of a life unlived, abandoning her swimming career, not becoming a glaciologist, not marrying Dan, leaving the band, never becoming a mother. The book's crushing weight mirrors how regrets have paralyzed her in life, preventing her from moving forward. Regret overload. The torrent of regrets becomes overwhelming, nearly suffocating her. She feels consumed by the sheer number of what-ifs. Mrs. Elm gently encourages her to make a choice, to select one regret to undo and see where it might lead. The shelves shift, ready to open a door for her. Every life begins now. Nora decides to address one of her deepest regrets, leaving Dan, her ex-fiancé. She wonders what her life would have been like had she married him and pursued his dream of owning a countryside pub. Mrs. Elm hands her the corresponding book, and Nora prepares to step inside a new reality. The Three Horseshoes. Nora finds herself in an alternate life, married to Dan, and co-owning a pub in Oxfordshire. At first, the life seems picturesque, a cozy community hub, laughter and warmth surrounding her. But cracks soon appear. Dan drinks heavily, their relationship is tense, and Nora realizes she is deeply unhappy. The fantasy crumbles. What once seemed like the life she missed out on turns out to be just another cage. Regret pushes her back into the library. The penultimate update. Back in the library, Nora feels shaken but intrigued. She begins to see the value of this strange place. Mrs. Elm urges her to keep exploring, reminding her that each life offers a lesson, even if it is not the answer she seeks. Nora realizes that through these journeys, she might discover what truly matters. The chessboard. Nora chooses another path, one in which she pursued her swimming career with full dedication. She discovers herself as an Olympic medalist, standing on podiums, admired by millions. Yet, the shine wears off quickly. The victories feel hollow, and loneliness clings to her. Success does not heal her internal wounds. Once more, she returns to the library, disillusioned. The only way to learn is to live. Nora begins to grasp an important truth. No life is perfect. Every existence carries struggles, pains, and imperfections. Living is the only way to truly learn and grow. Simply imagining alternatives is not enough. The experience of actually inhabiting those lives, however brief, has begun to reshape her understanding of meaning. Fire. In this version of her life, Nora is surrounded by fire, not literal flames, but passion, risk, and intensity. The choices she made here led to excitement, but also danger and instability. The lesson becomes clear. Every dream has a cost. Passion can bring fulfillment, but it also carries risks that cannot be ignored. Fish tank. Nora experiences a life where she has pursued a path of intellectual curiosity. She is immersed in study, analysis, and achievement. Yet she feels confined, like a fish in a tank, observed, contained, and limited. The sense of confinement highlights the emptiness of knowledge without emotional depth or connection. The last update Nora had posted before she found herself between life and death. This chapter brings us back to Nora's final act in her original life, a social media post made before her overdose. It is haunting in its emptiness and disconnection, a digital echo of her despair. It reminds us how far she had drifted from meaning before arriving at the Midnight Library, and why her journey through alternate lives matters so much. The successful life. Nora enters a version of her life where she has achieved enormous professional success. She is wealthy, admired, and recognized for her accomplishments. On the surface, this life looks enviable: prestigious awards, glamorous events, and an adoring public. Yet very quickly, the glitter fades. The pressures of maintaining her reputation weigh heavily. Every interaction feels transactional, and she senses an emptiness behind the admiration. Without deep human connection, the success feels more like a mask than a truth. Nora realizes that status and wealth cannot fill the void of loneliness. Hollow applause cannot substitute for genuine love, and this awareness pulls her back toward the library. Peppermint tea. In another possibility, Nora finds herself in a quiet, cozy home. She enjoys small comforts, evenings of calm, simple conversations, and moments of stillness. With a steaming cup of peppermint tea in hand, she experiences peace that contrasts sharply with her other lives. This chapter underscores the beauty of simplicity. Joy doesn't always come from grand achievements but can be found in stillness and warmth. Yet even here, Nora feels like an observer. The comfort is soothing, but something feels off. It isn't truly hers, and the borrowed sense of contentment cannot last. She begins to realize that happiness cannot simply be worn like a costume. The tree that is our life. Nora reflects on the metaphor of the tree, with every branch representing a different version of existence. Each decision she has made, and every decision she avoided, has grown into its own branch. She is struck by both the beauty and the terror of this vision. The vastness is awe-inspiring, but also paralyzing because it is impossible to explore every branch. The lesson is bittersweet. The richness of possibility makes life vast, but our limited perspective means we must learn to live with incompleteness. System error. In this chapter, Nora feels as if something has gone wrong in her exploration. Each life she visits exposes its own unique set of disappointments. She begins to doubt the very purpose of the library. The experience feels like a malfunction, as though the system itself is flawed. Her despair deepens as she questions whether peace is possible in any reality. The sensation of system error mirrors the inner breakdown that happens when hope feels inaccessible. Svalbard. Nora steps into the life she once imagined as a teenager, becoming a glaciologist. She now studies glaciers in the stark, icy wilderness of Svalbard. The Arctic landscape takes her breath away, its beauty raw and powerful. The work is meaningful, and she feels intellectually fulfilled. Yet the isolation quickly sets in. The silence is vast, the cold endless, and she is cut off from warmth and community. For all its fascination, this path carries a deep loneliness. She learns that even dreams, when lived, have shadows. Hugo Lefebvre. In this life, Nora meets Hugo, a fellow traveler between realities. He reveals that he too has his own version of a midnight library. Their conversations dig into philosophy, the burden of infinite choices, the temptation of always searching for a better life, and the emptiness that can follow. Hugo seems confident in his explorations, but Nora detects something hollow in his endless curiosity. It dawns on her that running from regret into alternate lives can itself become a trap, and that curiosity without grounding can feel like emptiness. Walking in circles. As Nora continues, she notices a pattern. Many of her lives, though different on the surface, lead to the same inner dissatisfaction. Whether she is rich, obscure, adored, or alone, she circles back to the same emptiness. This realization unsettles her. It isn't the lives that are flawed, but perhaps her own inability to feel at home in them. The metaphor of walking in circles mirrors her deeper struggle, searching for an answer without knowing the real question. A moment of extreme crisis in the middle of nowhere. In one life, Nora faces an immediate and terrifying crisis. She finds herself stranded, endangered, and utterly vulnerable. Survival depends on her instincts and courage. The fear is overwhelming, but so is the adrenaline. For the first time, she feels how fragile life can be. The crisis forces her to confront her capacity for resilience, reminding her that danger and fear are part of being alive. This chapter shows that the raw edges of existence can reveal truths comfort cannot. The frustration of not finding a library when you really need one. Nora longs desperately for the sanctuary of the midnight library during moments of despair in alternate lives. The comfort of its shelves, the guidance of Mrs. Elm, she begins to crave them. This chapter reveals how much the library has become her emotional safety net. Yet Mrs. Elm warns that the library was never meant to contain her, only to guide her. It is a stepping stone, not a destination. This truth unsettles Nora because she has come to rely on its certainty. Island. Nora lives alone on a remote island, far removed from society. At first, the peace of isolation feels like an escape from her regrets. But as time stretches on, she finds the solitude suffocating. The absence of human voices, of connection and warmth, gnaws at her. She realizes that even freedom can become its own kind of prison. Human beings are not meant to exist entirely apart. This revelation drives home the truth that meaning is tied to community. Permafrost. Back in Svalbard, Nora immerses herself in scientific work. The frozen landscape fascinates her, its stillness profound. Yet the very qualities that make it beautiful, its constancy, its quiet, also make it emotionally barren. Nora begins to feel frozen inside, mirroring the permafrost she studies. Though her mind is engaged, her heart feels locked away. This experience teaches her that intellectual pursuits alone cannot sustain the soul. One night in Longyearbyen, Nora spends time in the small Arctic community of Longyearbyen. The town is vibrant in its own rugged way, locals gathering, sharing warmth, creating life in an inhospitable place. For a while, she joins in, but even amidst this unique camaraderie, she feels disconnected. It is as though she is wearing another person's life, unable to shake the sensation of being a guest. Belonging remains elusive. Expectation. Here, Nora grapples with the crushing weight of expectation. She reflects on her family's hopes, society's pressures, and her own perfectionist tendencies. Much of her regret is tied not to her own desires but to the roles she tried to fulfill for others. The realization is painful but liberating. It underscores the danger of living to meet expectations rather than to follow one's own heart. Life and death, and the quantum wave function. Nora contemplates the scientific and philosophical dimensions of her experience. If every possibility exists, then every choice, every regret, has meaning and meaninglessness at once. Yet she realizes that living cannot be reduced to theory or equations. Quantum mechanics may explain possibilities, but it cannot capture the feeling of holding someone's hand, or the joy of music, or the ache of loss. Living, she realizes, is more than physics, it is human experience. If something is happening to me, I want to be there. Nora acknowledges that real living requires presence. To avoid pain is also to avoid joy. She reflects on all the moments she tried to escape discomfort, only to miss out on what was meaningful. This chapter represents a turning point. She begins to accept that life's richness lies in its wholeness, both suffering and delight. To truly live, she must embrace both. God and other librarians. Nora ponders the nature of the library itself. Who is Mrs. Elm? Is she a guide sent by something greater? A fragment of Nora's mind? Or something beyond comprehension? The ambiguity deepens the sense of mystery. The library may be divine, or psychological, or both. Whatever its nature, it has given her tools to see her life differently. The mystery itself becomes part of the lesson that not everything requires an answer. Fame. In this life, Nora becomes famous. She enjoys glamour, recognition, and the kind of attention many crave. Yet the constant scrutiny suffocates her. Privacy disappears, and every mistake becomes magnified. The adoration feels conditional, quickly turning into criticism when she falters. Fame is not freedom, but a cage with gilded bars. She learns that admiration from strangers is fragile, and true belonging cannot be bought with visibility. Milky Way. Nora contemplates her place in the vastness of the cosmos. She sees herself as part of the Milky Way, a tiny speck in a boundless universe. The sight fills her with awe and insignificance at once. Yet she realizes that insignificance does not mean meaninglessness. To be small is still to exist, and existence itself carries wonder. The paradox both humbles and empowers her. Wild and free, Nora embraces a life of adventure, traveling, exploring, breaking free from boundaries. She feels exhilarated, alive with adrenaline. Yet over time, she notices that rootlessness brings its own emptiness. Without ties, even freedom becomes hollow. The chapter shows that stability and belonging are as essential as adventure. Ryan Bailey. Nora finds herself in a relationship with Ryan Bailey, the actor she once admired. At first, it feels like a fantasy fulfilled. She is charmed by the glamour of being close to a star. But soon, she realizes the relationship is shallow, built more on image than substance. What seemed like a dream turns out to be hollow. Genuine connection, she realizes, cannot be conjured from fantasy. A silver tray of honey cakes. In this life, Nora experiences small pleasures, food, laughter, the sweetness of simplicity. The honey cakes symbolize contentment in life's little details. For a while, she enjoys this, realizing that meaning doesn't always come from grand gestures. Yet questions linger. Can small pleasures alone sustain a life? Or do they need to be paired with deeper purpose? This tension keeps her searching. The podcast of revelations. Nora finds herself hosting a podcast, sharing her reflections and wisdom with others. She experiences the joy of reaching people, influencing them, and offering comfort. But with the influence comes responsibility. She wonders if she is prepared to carry the weight of others' expectations. Still, this life gives her a glimpse of how her words, even in imperfection, can matter to others. It is a revelation about the power of sharing one's story. Lost in the library, Nora begins to feel overwhelmed by the endless shelves. What once felt magical now feels suffocating. The infinite choices seem less like opportunities and more like an eternal maze with no exit. For every book she sees, she wonders what kind of existence it represents, but the sheer immensity of possibilities begins to crush her. The library, once a comfort, now threatens to become her prison. She fears she will never find the life that feels right, a gnawing sense that even with endless choices, true belonging may not exist. The perfect life. In this version, Nora is transported to a life that seems flawless, a loving partner, success, stability, and admiration from those around her. At first glance, it appears she has found what she always longed for. But perfection soon reveals its fragility. Beneath the polished surface, Nora senses falseness. The relationships feel hollow, her accomplishments ring with artificiality, and she realizes that no life, no matter how glittering, is immune to cracks. The idea of a perfect life collapses under the weight of its own illusion. A kind of success, Nora finds herself celebrated as an accomplished author. She attends events, signs books, and enjoys the thrill of recognition. For a brief time, she is intoxicated by the applause and admiration. Yet at night, when the crowds disappear, she is left alone with her thoughts. The hollowness returns. Creative success cannot patch the deeper wounds of self-doubt and loneliness. Nora learns that achievements can decorate a life, but cannot replace a sense of purpose or genuine connection. Death is life. This chapter brings Nora to a moment of reflection. She begins to see each life not only as an alternate story, but as a lesson about mortality. Every ending she experiences in these lives reminds her that death is not an enemy, but a mirror, showing her that the fragility of existence is what gives it meaning. The inevitability of endings is what makes living worthwhile. The paradox comforts her. Life cannot exist without death, and death gives life its value. A thing I have learned. Piece by piece, Nora's experiences stitch together into insight. She realizes fulfillment doesn't come from eliminating regret, because regret is inevitable. What matters is acceptance, embracing her choices, flaws, and limitations. Instead of imagining a life without mistakes, she begins to value the idea of learning through them. This new awareness reshapes her inner world, planting seeds of resilience. The last life, Nora enters a final existence where her regrets seem erased. She is surrounded by love, opportunity, and all the things she once believed she wanted. At first, it feels like bliss, but as time stretches, she realizes something subtle. The happiness feels borrowed. This life doesn't belong to her, and living it would be a betrayal of her authentic self. No matter how perfect it looks, a life built on someone else's choices cannot sustain her. She understands that truth and authenticity matter more than fantasy. Escaping the library. Suddenly, the midnight library begins to collapse. Shelves groan, books tumble, and the floor quakes. The once stable sanctuary dissolves into chaos. Nora grasps the symbolism. her time is running out. In her root life, her body edges closer to death. The destruction of the library forces her to confront her urgency. She must decide whether to cling to existence or give up entirely. Midnight. The collapse halts as the clock strikes midnight again, echoing through the library. In this suspended silence, Nora faces her deepest fears. Regret, despair, loneliness, all weigh heavily. But in this fragile instant, she admits to herself something powerful. She wants to live. That acknowledgement, quiet but absolute, becomes her lifeline. The Book of Nora Seed. On the desk lies a single volume titled The Book of Nora Seed. With trembling hands, she opens it. Instead of another possible life, she finds her own story, filled with flaws, stumbles, and quiet joys. The book doesn't promise perfection but offers authenticity. It teaches her that her own life, the one she wanted to escape, is still worthy. Acceptance, not reinvention, is the answer. A thing you couldn't imagine. Nora is surprised by an unexpected realization. Even in despair, new joys can emerge. Life is unpredictable, and its surprises often bring meaning. She grasps that the very uncertainty she once feared is what makes existence worthwhile. A future cannot be fully known, and that is precisely why it carries hope. Being alive, Nora embraces the raw sensation of existence, the beat of her heart, the rhythm of her breath, the simple awareness of being. She realizes life's beauty is not in monumental achievements, but in the very act of being alive. Ordinary moments are extraordinary when seen clearly, and this awareness fills her with gratitude. This story is about a library. She reflects that the Midnight Library itself is symbolic. It is not a literal place, but an imaginative bridge that helped her confront regret and rediscover purpose. The shelves, the books, and even Mrs. Elm represent tools for understanding her mind. The library's destruction shows it was never meant to last. It was a passage, not a home. One last chance. With the collapse accelerating, Nora faces her final choice. Will she let herself slip into nothingness, or will she embrace her flawed root life? This decision carries immense weight. She realizes she has one last chance to choose living, no matter how imperfect. The urgency sharpens her clarity. She wants to return. Don't you dare give up, Nora Seed. Mrs. Elm appears, urging Nora to fight. Her words echo with strength. Life is not certainty but possibility. Even when burdened by pain, there is always potential for joy. The encouragement feels like a hand pulling Nora upward, reminding her she is not powerless. The tree. Nora envisions the vast tree of life once more, its branches infinite. But unlike before, she no longer feels overwhelmed. Instead, she finds peace in choosing one branch, her own. She doesn't need to explore every possibility. The life she was born into is enough, as long as she learns to cherish it. Back to the root life. Nora awakens in her original body, gasping after her overdose. The room is familiar yet renewed in her eyes. Though weak and trembling, she feels relief wash over her. She is alive, and the chance to continue is hers. The decision to embrace her root life signals her rebirth. To live. She begins to notice the smallest details, the texture of air, the sound of passing cars, the light filtering through the window. Each detail feels precious. Nora realizes that survival is a victory, and every new moment offers an opportunity to start fresh. To love. Love now means more than romance. It extends to kindness, compassion, and connection. She feels renewed affection for her brother, her neighbors, her friends, and even herself. Love is not about perfection but about presence and care, and it fills her with warmth. To be. Nora makes peace with simply existing. She no longer needs to chase every possibility or erase every regret. To be is enough, to exist in the present, flawed but whole. Her acceptance allows her to finally breathe freely. To choose. She acknowledges the quiet power of choice. Every small decision shapes a future. While she cannot rewrite the past, she can write what comes next. This realization empowers her to take responsibility for her present life. Human. At last, Nora fully accepts her humanity. She is not infinite or flawless, but she doesn't need to be. Her limitations, mistakes, and vulnerability make her human, and her humanity makes her capable of love, growth, and meaning. She is freed from the suffocating weight of regret. How it ends. The story closes with Nora determined to live her own life, embracing its messiness and uncertainty. She understands she will never explore every possible version of herself, but she no longer wants to. The midnight library fades away, leaving her with the strength to face reality. She steps forward, renewed, hopeful, and ready to continue. In the end, Nora discovers that no life is free from struggle, and no single choice could have guaranteed happiness. What matters is finding purpose in the life we are already living, appreciating small joys, and accepting that imperfection is part of existence. The Midnight Library is ultimately a story about hope, reminding us that while we can't undo the past, we can choose to live more fully in the present. And sometimes, the life we've been trying to escape holds more possibility than we realize. So what about you? If you had a chance to step into the Midnight Library, which regret would you want to undo? And what would you hope to find on the other side?